Thank you for joining me for this week's 2018 midterms and next steps discussion. Today, I'll be going overview the results of some key congressional elections, but also discussing the overall implications of the election, and then talking about some next steps. So I'll do a full analysis and a written report that we'll do at a later point, but today just wanted to give you an overview and talk about the significance of the election. So as you may recall, Capital Consulting Strategies is a premier strategy consulting firm specializing in political, business, and marketing strategy. We're live today on Facebook, so you can follow us along at Where's Your Strategy on Facebook, on Twitter at My Capital Firm, on Instagram also at My Capital Firm, and then we'll upload this to our YouTube channel, which is Capital Consulting Strategies, LLC. So today, as I mentioned, we'll go over some midterm results and some key statewide races. We'll talk about the statistics overall, the implications of voting. So you may recall in a previous session, I talked about whether or not your vote mattered. That was part of an outreach event that we did. But then also a few weeks ago, we talked about whether or not your vote mattered. So we'll build on that discussion, and then we'll transition to talk about next steps. So overall, in South Carolina, where we're based, Democrats did relatively well. They were able to pick up a congressional seat, Congressional District 1, where Joe Cunningham was able to beat Katie Arrington. Also, Democrats picked up 2 SC House seats. J.A. Moore was able to oust incumbent Samuel Rivers, and then Crystal Simmons also picked up a House seat as well. On the Senate side, this is slightly different. So this seat was previously held by John Corson, who was a Republican, who resigned the seat unexpectedly due to ethics violations, which triggered a special election, and then ultimately the general election where Benjamin Dunn versus Dick Harpootlian, and of course Dick Harpootlian won the election. But with that, this was one of the more expensive statewide races for Senate. But Dick Harpootlian was able to be successful and turn the seat that was favored to be Republican to a Democratic seat. Nationally, over 113 million people voted. This is extremely high. When you look at the midterm results in 2014, approximately 36.4% people voted in the midterms then, compared to 49%. And so this election in particular, a lot of people saw this as a referendum against President Trump. So this sparked lots of national voter outreach efforts. In South Carolina, there was the Adopt a Precinct project where each precinct was assigned a precinct captain to get out the vote. But similar projects occurred in other states like Georgia, where you had national celebrities like Oprah coming to canvass for Stacey Abrams. So given the vitriolic nature of our politics over the last 2 years, this sparked a lot of individuals to come out to vote. And also it encouraged a lot of newly registered voters as well. In the full report that we'll publish at a later point, we'll go into a deep analysis as to why this occurred, and we'll look at some key trends. But for now, we wanted to underscore the exponential increase between people who voted in 2014 versus people who voted in this last term election. Also notably, Democrats flipped gubernatorial seats in 7 states, notably in Kansas and Wisconsin. We still have some pending races in Florida, which is too close to call, in Arizona. Per Florida law, it's going to spark a recount. And so I'll discuss that a little bit later on. But certainly every vote will be counted in this race, and also in Georgia, one of the key races as well. And so when we look at the 2018 congressional results, we know that the U.S. House of Representatives was taken back by Democrats. And what's interesting to note about this will be one of the more female represented Congresses that we've had. So we'll have Democrats picked up about 30 seats, but although women will hold about 25% of Congress overall, this still is a gross underrepresentation of women in Congress, as women are the majority of the electorate, but are still significantly underrepresented. On the Senate side, there are still races pending, as I mentioned, Florida, but we already know at a minimum, Republicans have broadened their gap and have picked up more seats on the Republican side and have broadened their gap. And so they'll have at least 51 seats. And depending on the recount efforts, it may go up as high as 54. So South Carolina, no different than other states, had record turnout. So for this election, there were 54.87% turnout, so roughly 1.7 million people voted, compared to the 3.1 million people that were registered. And when you look at this is interesting because in 2014, and I pulled 2014 results because 2016 really isn't an accurate representation because we always have higher turnout during presidential years. So I looked at the general election in 2014, and you saw that there were 2.8 million people that were registered and 1.26 ballots were cast. So just 43% overall. I highlighted Georgia because Georgia, as I mentioned, got a lot of national attention, and actually Georgia had a higher rate of turnout given the gubernatorial race. But overall, 61% of people voted compared to the 3.9 million people ballots were cast, but you had over 6.4 million people that were registered to vote. And then you can see that there